Greetings everyone, this is David Arhan, and today's video is going to be on how scientific and inductive reasoning proves the existence of God. This is because if scientific and inductive reasoning, which presupposes uniformity of nature, are true ways for us to know things, then God necessarily has to exist because he's the only necessary precondition for uniformity of nature. And I will be explaining why that's the case in this video. So I'll start from very basic things like what is science, what is informative nature, explain these things, and then I'll go to the argument for why this is the case. So a key thing we need to understand about science is that it assumes what we call uniformity of nature in order to test certain hypotheses and make observations about the universe and make conclusions about the world in this light. So what is uniformity of nature? It's the assumption that the same natural laws and processes that operate in our present-day scientific observations will operate in the same way as they have in the past. So, in other words, the future will be like the past. The future resembles the past in this way. We can give some real-world examples that at the very least seem to be legitimate ways of knowing things, like the sun always rising from the east. Right? The sun always rises from the east, so tomorrow it's also going to rise from the east. Trees, whenever they fall, it always causes noise. So the next time a tree is going to fall, it's going to cause noise, even if no one is going to hear it. Or copper has conducted electricity in the past, it will do the same in the future, right? Within the same conditions. So natural phenomena in the world will act in the same way they have in the past. The issue is the problem of induction, which was introduced by David Hume. The assumption of uniformity of nature to justify scientific and inductive thinking is circular, which I will be explaining exactly how it is circular. And it's at the same time, there are certain counter examples one can use to show that, wait a second, this is not a legitimate way of reasoning always, right? So, to give an example, right, again, the sun always rose from the east. It doesn't mean that alone is a justifiable reason for why it will rise from the east tomorrow. Another, and a main counterexample that I like to use, every time death occurs, right, this event occurs, it's not me. It's always someone else. Therefore, the next time death will occur, it's not going to be me. It's never going to be me, which means I'm immortal, right? Obviously, this does not make any sense, but it's the same exact reasoning as saying copper always conducts electricity or the sun will rise from the east tomorrow, right? It's the same exact reasoning. That's the problem with this kind of inductive reasoning in its essence. So a key point that I want to make here is I'm not trying to say that if you don't believe in God, then you can't know anything scientifically. What I'm saying is that, if there is scientific knowledge, which I do think there is scientific knowledge, I do think we can use inductive reasoning to know certain things. If this is the case, well, this is possible only if God exists, right? That's the argument that I'm trying to make here. And another thing that we need to understand is that belief in induction and scientific reasoning and uniformity nature is without justification and warrant, seemingly, right? And if it is without justification and warrant, then our beliefs that use these principles, like science, inductive reasoning, uniformity of nature, is also without justification or warrant. So we will be unable to know many different things in the world, which is a huge problem. So how is this argument circular? Right, we know nature is uniform, the future is like the past, because it has always been like the past, which is how we know nature is uniform and the future is like the past, right? So you can kind of see it's self-referential, it's a circular argument. So it's not a valid form of argument, it's viciously circular. So how can we justify uniformity of nature? This is where we get to the main argument. Within a naturalistic and atheistic framework, and people have been trying to do this for hundreds of years, I don't think anyone has been successful. So I think it's justifiable to say, within a naturalistic or atheistic framework, it seems like you can't really justify a very important principle that is the foundation of science, which also conversely means you can't really justify scientific knowledge either. But a worldview, this is the key point, a worldview which believes in an omniscient, omnibenevolent, so this God doesn't just play around and change the laws, and a provident God, provident meaning that he upholds the laws of nature that he himself has founded. A belief in such a thing, as such a being, well, if your worldview contains a belief in a being such as this, then you have an account for uniformity of nature. And if we think of this in a different way, the way I present might not be convincing, but if we think of this in a different way, which is that if, atheistic thinking cannot justify science, but only God can, and scientific reasoning does give us knowledge, then it means necessarily God exists. That's basically the argument. So I will present it in this way. If God doesn't exist, then uniformity of nature inductive reasoning is not justified or warranted. If uniformity of nature inductive reasoning is not justified or warranted, then beliefs based on these principles are also not justified or warranted. But they clearly are justified and warranted. I mean, when we, do scientific research, when we test things, we learn new things about the world. We really do learn and know certain things about the world. And so it means that God has to exist, right? That's basically the argument. Now, I don't think premise 1, premise 2, I don't think you can really deny these premises. Maybe some people might try to deny premise 1. As I said, I haven't really seen a good counter argument, but one can deny maybe premise 3. One can say, just flat out say, oh, I was a science head all this time, but actually now I'm not. I don't believe, we can't learn new things from inductive reasoning. We can't learn new things from science, right? We can believe we learn, but we don't actually know these things, right? Which will reduce to some kind of skepticism. Now, the problem with skepticism is that if you basically say that we don't really know anything, right? I mean, I would say, if you say we don't know anything about inductive reasoning, I think, that will eliminate like a huge portion of things that we know, right, in the world. And I will say it seems like it reduces itself to a general skepticism, right? But if general skepticism is the case, then your knowledge about the truth of skepticism will also be null and void. So you won't know that either, which you will be believing in something that you don't know is true, you don't have any knowledge of. You are basically telling us that, hey, I don't know anything, which doesn't really sound reasonable. I mean, if someone told me that, hey, none of us know anything, I don't know anything, right? If someone told me that, I would kind of just say, I'd rather believe in a God and know that I do know things than believing in whatever nonsense you believe. I think that sounds a lot more reasonable. And that's all I have to say for today. Thank you all for watching. And if you want to join if you want to become a Patreon financier and enjoy some bonuses like early access to my content, full versions of certain videos that will come in the future, Patreon only Q&As and so on and so forth, I will very much be happy if you could join. Thank you to those who are in the Patreon financier group, to those in the boss tier, $5 tier, Bone, Tony, Trofa, Carter, Sean, Peyton, Brian, Eddie, Maximus, Care, Dave, Norbert. Thank you for being a part of my Patreon. Especially thank you to those in the Precept Gang tier, $15 tier, Marcus Anastasius, Marcus Search, Marco Piper, Vander, Sean, Diet, Solat, Vlad, and Nectars. And thank you for watching this video. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Comment, give some engagement, right? Make this video, I guess, wider known if you really like this video. And I'll see all of you in the next one. Thank you for watching, and goodbye and take care.